I think maybe if it's all right, we can go ahead and begin our event.
I think so.
Yeah. Welcome everyone to another Able Muse reading, a slightly different one. We'll have some Able Muse editors reading a poem. We've got two readers reading from books that are forthcoming, which is, I believe, a departure for us, but a welcome addition to our repertoire. If I can just remind you that if you are not if you're not reading or responding, it might be wisest to have microphones muted, just to make sure that we don't end up with any sorts of feedback loops or echoes. And what I'll do is before each reader begins, maybe I'll just mute all in case one of our mute buttons escaped us. And then that means for each reader, you'll have to unmute yourself just to be sure that you're being heard. To begin, may I invite Alex Pepple, whom I'll introduce more fully before he reads, to give us a few announcements. Alex?
Okay, thank you, Stephen. And it's good to see all your faces on the Zoom gallery here. Welcome to another afternoon of what I hope will be a fabulous Able Muse reading. And as Stephen mentioned, we're doing something slightly different today in that we have two Able Muse Book Award winners reading from their collections. We'll have Amy Glynn with 2022 winner with Romance Language. Actually, I have the book here somewhere. There we go. So this is Romance Language from Amy Glynn. We'll have it in paperback and in hardcover. And we'll also have Kelly Rowe reading from Rise from the River. Well, only have it in paperbacks, but don't protest yet, Kelly. Your hardcover is in the pipeline. Besides Kelly and Amy reading, we also have, as Stephen mentioned, reading from Able Muse Poetry editors. And this is might be interesting for those of you who want to submit poems to Able Muse, because our open reading period is still open, but only till July 15. And because besides reading a poem of theirs or from someone else, each editor might say something about what they're looking for in terms of submission. And while I'm introducing the book, I'll have to congratulate Kelly on a very positive review she just received from North American Review. Congratulations, Kelly. And one of the things they said there was that Kelly's finely crafted poems in Rise Above the River tell a very an important contribution to the poetry of loss. And also, while congratulating everyone, I'm not sure if Katie Hastock is here, but she also received a starred review at Kirkus Review for her book, which is Wolf Trees, recently pre-released by Able Muse Press. And so congratulations, Katie. And Kirkus Review is one of the prestigious venues for reviews. And while I'm introducing books, I should say that our host, Stephen, also has a book recently out, pre-release, and that's We're All, how is it again? We're All Too Loud to Hear. See, I forgot the title already. And other people with new books, let me see who else is here. Yes, we have John Drury, whom I just saw a while ago. And this is the Teller's Cage, just pre-released from John. And I think that's everything I have here in terms of new books. All right. So, and with that, I'll also tell everyone who wants to submit that the submission link is at ablemuse.com. Go there and submit individual poems, fiction, nonfiction. And incidentally, the submission window is also currently open at Able Muse Press, and that is for book manuscripts of poetry, fiction, and nonfiction also. And that is also till July 15. So be sure to submit individual poems to ablemuse.com and individual and book manuscripts to ablemusepress.com. Otherwise, if you mix them up, you might get very long delays, and you get a response that says a decline for incorrect submission because you never got to the right editors. So just be sure you don't mix it up. And with that, I'll also urge everyone to support the Able Muse by subscribing to the journal itself, which is Able Muse. This is the current issue at ablemuse.com. I'll donate to Able Muse to help us in our mission to stay afloat in these trying economic and cultural times, and also support the authors, our readers today and other Able Muse authors by buying their books at ablemusepress.com or wherever books are sold. So thank you all for coming this afternoon, and I hope we'll have a great event. And with that, I give you your host, Stephen. Take it away, Stephen.
Thank you so much, Alex. This is going to be a great day.
Was I muted all this time?
No, definitely not. No, I timed
Okay.
it so that it was right as you were signing off.
Okay,
there.
I wasn't sure. Okay.
No, it's great. It was the most skillful I've ever been as a host of anything, to be honest with you. I am excited about today because we have a number of readers, all of them excellent writers, but because we have several of them, I'm just going to keep things moving, if that's all right with everybody. And so we'll dive in, we'll hear some poems. I do hope that the editors will feel free to say a few words about what they're looking for in poetry submissions. And this is just a reminder to everyone who's here, we would love to see your work. So please don't hesitate to send it to us if you have things that you are, ready to send to us. Our first reader is Maryann Corbett. Maryann Corbett is the author of 6 books of poems, including 3 from Able Muse. Her newest, officially out on July 7th, is The O in the Air from Franciscan University Press. Her work has won the Richard Wilbur Book Award and the Willis Barnstone Translation Prize, has appeared or is forthcoming in such magazines as Rattle, Ecotone, Beloit Poetry Journal, Image, Literary Imagination, and Raritan, and is included in anthologies like Best American Poetry 2018. She lives in St. Paul, Minnesota. Would you please welcome Maryann?
Okay, have I successfully unmuted myself? Yay. I am going to read to you a poem called Guzzle from a Bottle of Shalimar, 1956. The clear amber scent in its bottle, its glint from the top of the vanity, cut crystal flutes with a frosted glass stopper catching the sun on her vanity. The glamorous dreams of our mother, unspoken to curious children, were sharp as the quarter moon curve of that bottle enshrined on the vanity. What were they guarding? What secrets? And how would a child understand them? And what was I thinking, small magpie lured on by the glitter of vanity? Wreckage of beauties, the spill, the wet, the gray film on the rosewood. I was the firstborn, the first to drive thorns through the heart of her vanity. Painfully, mothers forgive. On the mountain with 7 stories, how long will the granite of penitence weigh on the spine of my vanity? And what do my children remember? What hauntings by anger and tears does my memory hide from itself in the metal-bound chest of my vanity? 60 years on, and the stain-mottled dresser now broods in my bedroom, breathing regret and my name and the words of the preacher, vanity. So, since I should say something about what we are looking for as editors of poetry at Able Muse, I want to take this opportunity to mention things that we don't see often enough. One, non-iambic meters, something other than iambs. And two, mixtures of length of line, pentameter and trimeter, nonce forms, invented stanzas. Go hog wild. That's it from me.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Maryann. I'm with you on all of that too. Beautiful, beautiful. Our next reader is Daniel Galef. Daniel Galef's first book is Imaginary Sonnets, currently in pre-release with a release date of July 14th. The collection consists of 70 persona poems in the voice of various historical figures, literary characters, and inanimate objects, including a Roman triumphal arch and a chicken taco. His writing has recently been featured in The New Yorker, but only in the sense that last year he placed second in the cartoon caption contest. Will you welcome Daniel Galef with me, please?
Thank you very much. So yeah, I'm going to read a poem from that book coming out from Able Muse this month. They all have footnotes. They're very research intensive, but the footnotes are sort of optional. If anyone here remembers about 10 years ago, Cecilia Ximenez, a Spanish painter, repainted a mural of Christ on a church wall in Spain and went briefly viral. There was a Saturday Night Live skit about her, etc. So I wrote this about her painting of Christ and about bad art generally. This is Ximenez addresses the Virgin of Mercy. We've both produced a Christ. Yours was of flesh and mine of mural plaster. Both predate our pure conception. Frescoes must be fresh, but light and life are old. All art came late. The fallacy of Zeuxis and Parrhasius was thinking that the Lord demands good taste. As long as we are modest, kind, and chaste, then heaven takes our prayers, adios gracias. Who cares just how in tune a psalm is sung, how clear the voice, or if it keeps good time? The spirit's in the heart and not the tongue. All art is recreation. On wet lime, like on the skin of water, we can limn. And if we mean it, it will be a hymn. And that was just partly to emphasize that there is more to art than technical ability. And in that line, talking about the kind of things I'm looking for when reading Able Muse submissions, I'm not holding this up as an example of what I'm looking for, because, be frank, I'm looking for writing that's better than mine when I'm going through the slush pile. I'm looking for things that I can't do and things that I hadn't thought of doing, especially because this is a formalist journal. I think there's so much interest to be found in placing a priority on rich eclecticism, a variety of tones and styles, and, as Maryann said, different forms. Traditional and modern, conversational and stylized. And one thing that I'm always on the lookout for, just because of a personal bias, because I got my start writing a lot of silly little light verse, is I think we could get so much more literary humor and humorous formal verse.
That's excellent, Daniel. Thank you so much for that poem and for those observations. Terrific, terrific. The idea that life is not just technique really makes me feel better about my life right now, to be perfectly frank. That's good news. Our next reader this afternoon is Jean Kreiling. Jean L. Kreiling is the author of 3 collections of poetry: Shared History from 2022, Arts and Letters and Love from 2018, and The Truth in Dissonance from 2014. Her work has been awarded the Able Muse Wright Prize, the Frost Farm Prize, the Kelsey Books Metrical Poetry Prize, the Plymouth Poetry Contest Prize, and the Raina Aspayat Poetry Award, among other honors. I'm so sorry for that horrible mispronunciation of a poet whose work I love. This is evidence that Daniel was correct about imperfection. She is Professor Emeritus of Music at Bridgewater State University and a longtime member of the Powwow River Poets. She lives on the coast of Massachusetts. Please welcome Jean.
Thank you, Stephen. Speaking of things I can't do, I'm going to read a poem not by me, but by Rina Espayat. It's a villanelle called Guidelines. Here's what you need to do since time began. Find something, diamond rare or carbon cheap, it's all the same, and love it all you can. It should be something close, a field, a man, a line of verse, a mouth, a child asleep, that feels like the world's heart since time began. Don't measure much or lay things out or scan. Don't save yourself for later, you won't keep. Spend yourself now on loving all you can. It's going to hurt. That was the risk you ran with your first breath. You knew the price was steep, that loss is what there is, since time began subtracting from your balance. That's the plan. Too late to quibble now, you're in too deep. Just love what you still have, while you still can. Don't count on schemes, it's far too short a span from the first sowing till they come to reap. One way alone to count since time began. Love something, love it hard, now, all you can. Rina didn't mean to set forth guidelines for submitting to Able Muse when she titled that poem Guidelines, but that poem is a wonderful example of what lights up this editor's eyes. It's clearly formal, but the form doesn't shout at you. Instead, it's there to further the message, the speaker's insistence on this very simple instruction. It is iambic pentameter, clearly, but it's flexible iambic pentameter, part of a comfortable conversational style. The rhymes are exact, but clearly the words weren't chosen just for matching sounds, but because they are such significant words, as in the phrases, "You won't keep," and "the price was steep," or "since time began," and "the risk you ran." Rina is so good at what I think is a huge challenge for formalist poets, creating music in a poem without creating a sing-song effect. And finally, while the poet is conveying some fairly abstract ideas here, it's all about love, she provides lots of concrete details to hang your hat on: a diamond, a sleeping child, an account balance. Rina is a hero to many of us, and I think this poem demonstrates why. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jean. That was excellent. That was beautiful. Thank you. Our next reader is our own Alex Pepple. Alexander Pepple is an electrical and software engineer. His poetry, fiction, and essays have appeared or are forthcoming in Ballast Journal, Blue Unicorn, Hopkins Review, Rosebud, Euphony, Light, Chronicles, Think, River Styx, Barrow Street, American Arts Quarterly, Measure, Westward Quarterly, and elsewhere. He founded and edits Able Muse and its related presses and directs its related Erotosphere online literary workshop. He edited the Able Muse anthology from 2010. Please welcome Alex Pepple.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Stephen. I'll be reading from a sonnet sequence of mine, which I've titled Adam to Zebra, A to Z Sonnets. Now, this are sonnets such that for a sonnet of a given alphabet, all the lines begin with that alphabet. Now, these have met with what I will say some success in that I have the A and the Z and a few intervening ones already published. So that's good. And even I might do some shameless name dropping here, because as Jean's hero, Rina P. Espaillat, wrote one for me recently. And she titled it A is for Alex. And so for those who want to write one also, maybe, a few rules is that all the words for each line, the beginning word cannot be repeated. And except maybe in the title, which is usually 2 words long, except discounting articles. And these words are preferably taken from the beginning words of the lines. And these are in proper tetrameters, properly rhymed. And with that, here comes the S sonnet from Adam to Zebra, titled Snaking South. And this is loosely about today's culture of swipe right, swipe left, updating culture. Seduced, her slinking heart recoils, sinfully undressed by algorithm. Signs were a mist of masked gargoyles, sinuous around unzippered pants, scallywags, pitching gloaming rhythm. Surely there was a bone-thin chance Sodom remained uncharted with him, seeking instead a wanton romance. Science might temper that mistrust skeptics provide. Sorry, I just changed this line. Science might temper that mistrust she now provides safe harbor to. Suffice it to say, a fear of loss sublimates oftentimes to true statements of love, expert statistics sprinkle as if dispensed by mystics. Now, thank you. Now, so what I'm looking for in terms of submission, I don't think it's really that much relevant anymore, since I'm no more poetry editor, having offloaded that responsibility to Stephen and his cohorts. But when I was looking for submission as editor, I'll just give you an overview that there are very many good poems that end up getting rejected. It's not because they're not worthy of publication, but because there's a limited amount of space, and you're essentially competing with other good poems. So if you don't send your best, you might not make it in. So while we're interested in formal poetry, but we also look at everything. So the overriding criteria is excellence. So if you send us something excellent that can compete with other excellent poems, maybe you'll make it in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. That is excellent, excellent. Our next reader is Sally Thomas. Sally Thomas is the author of a poetry collection, Motherland, available through Able Muse Press as of 2020, and a novel, Works of Mercy, published by Wise Blood Books in 2022. She has also co-edited the Paraclete Press anthology, Christian Poetry in America Since 1940, which received the 2023 Book Award in Culture and the Arts from Christianity Today, and contributes regularly to the Poem of the Day column at the New York Sun. Will you please welcome Sally Thomas with me?
Thank you, Stephen. I'm going to read a poem called The Bell. Today is here, tomorrow's there, yesterday lies where it fell. Time's a line that points to where we go. The last tram rings its bell. Where tracks run into grass, descend. Let's start walking past the end. Yesterday lies where it fell, when our mothers called us in. Waters greening down the well, droning houseflies live in sin. Our dogs broke loose and ran away. Nothing that we love can stay. Time's a line that points to where we're going. Can you read the map? Cicada songs abrade the air all afternoon. You need a nap? Pull down your hat to shade your eyes and try to think of lullabies. We go, the last tram rings its bell, along the blinding boulevard. Yesterday lies where it fell, tomorrow's sunning in the yard. Poplars waver in the dust, summers fly where summers must. Where tracks run into grass, descend, run barefoot through the shivering green. Where are we? Don't you know? Pretend that we were born here. Hills unseen stand tall and blue behind a cloud. Late cicadas cry aloud. Let's start walking past the end of everything we ever knew. Let evening take us by the hand. Shadows like the hills are blue. Yesterday lies where it fell. Somewhere the last tram rings its bell. So I am very much the new kid on the editorial team, and I'm not sure I have anything really substantial to add to everything that everybody else has said. I was nodding when Maryann said what she was and wasn't looking for, and Jean and Daniel. I was casting my mind back over the poems that I've long listed in the short time that I've been reading for Able Muse, and it's hard even to see a thread. I mean, excellence. I like to be surprised. I like form, although I think the first poem that I long listed actually was a free verse poem in a submission that was mostly formal poems, but the free verse poem had just an integrity of voice and a sense of balance and excellence that made it a standout even among poems that were more traditionally formal. As you might have surmised from that poem, I'm a real sucker for repetitive forms. I really like pantoums. That was a trend to say. Amy says, yes, free verse is a form. You're right. Anyway, I do like repetitive, obsessive forms a lot. So those always tend to capture my attention. But otherwise, what they said.
Thank you so much, Sally. I was told that I am also supposed to read a poem, and I thought I might be able to get out of it if the time did not permit, but I think we're okay, and I don't think I can use that as an excuse. So I hope everybody will be patient with me as I read one from the new book. I have my own bio in front of me. I don't know if I thought I was going to forget it, but I did write it down. The basic outline is I'm the poetry editor at Able Muse, and I do have a new book out through the press called World Too Loud to Hear. So the poem I'd like to read to you is called Obligations. It's a poem that revels in etymology, because obligation, as the poem points out, sounds so drab and terrible, but it's sort of beautiful when you look at its roots. Obligations. How awful they can sound, like weekend chores. So primly latinate and obstinate the obligations one naturally abhors and more or less can't wait to pass down to the upstart generations, like heirloom silverware or global warming, debt or doing dishes. And yet, at root, seen through, they're ties, kin to the lattice work that backs a chair or stitcheries that bind our wiles and wishes in books we canonize. And there'd be no immortal tapestries to sanctify a space without the back and forth of looms. No complex harmonies, no lovers who enlace their fingers down the aisle as brides and grooms. No healing ligatures, not one religion to redeem the times. Indeed, our very DNA, composed of double helices, ensures our subtlest chemistries must find their rhymes. What more is there to say? Behold the weeping woman who would bring the costliest libation, or weave long promises of prayer, who'd give most anything, for one more obligation, the nightly braiding of a young girl's hair. Thank you. I would like to second everything that all of the editors who have already read have said. I think when I'm looking at poems, I am eager to be surprised. I'd like it to be funky fresh. I will tell you that I see a lot of sonnets, which I appreciate, but also want to see things other than sonnets when it's coming time for the Able Muse pool, because we get a lot of them. I cannot speak for my fellow editors, but I love syllabics. I'm interested in classical meters that have been adapted into English. I'm interested in counted verse. I mean, if you put time into shaping it, I would like to see it, is what it comes down to. That's about it when it comes to I don't have an editorial program, and I don't have a real aesthetic philosophy apart from I'd really like it to be good. And do you know what I will tell you that maybe is actually helpful is for the poems I get that I feel certain about right away, it kind of reminds me of when you flick good crystal and it just keeps ringing. I want that at the end of my poem. I want it to keep ringing, because I don't like poems where I finish the poem and it's like, okay, let's move on. I like that poem where it feels like whatever was happening there just keeps happening afterwards. So that's what I can offer you on that. I'm super excited in this moment because this feels like a festival, and we've had all these bands come on and it's been awesome, but the headliners are here and the energy is palpable. That's how I feel right now. This feels like I wasn't at Woodstock, so I'm not going to say anything about Woodstock. Maybe Bonnaroo or some Lollapalooza, I don't know, but it feels like that. We have two readers coming up. We're going to hear from Amy Glynn and Kelly Rowe, both of whom have books coming out through Able Muse. Amy, are you ready? I mean, I'm going to do an intro for you. I'm not going to just throw you out there. Okay.
Yeah, just go after Stephen, they said. And I said, okay.
I'm so excited to hear you read right now. It's going to be excellent. All right. Amy Glynn is a poet, essayist, and fiction writer. Her first poetry collection, A Modern Herbal, was published by Measure Press in 2013. Her second, Romance Language, won the Able Muse Book Award. Her poems have appeared in Orion Poetry Northwest, New England Review, Southern Poetry Review, Southwest Review, and Able Muse, among many others. She has been a recipient of the Troubadour Prize, the Spur Award of the Academy of Western Writers, the Litero Latte Essay Prize, Poetry Northwest's Carolyn Kaiser Award, and 2 Best American Poetry Anthology inclusions. An unreconstructed natural history geek, Amy has been a featured guest lecturer on intersections of creative writing and natural science in university, public library, and private settings. Her first essay collection, My Empire of Dirt, is forthcoming from, is it Burfois Books?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. A multi-generation native of the San Francisco Bay Area, she lives and writes in Lafayette, California, where she served as inaugural municipal poet laureate. Will you welcome with me Amy Glynn?
Thank you. Oh, the joy of being in awesome company, you guys. This is an embarrassment of riches already. Thank you so much. So I don't want to gloss myself into a hole here, and I'll try not to. This book has been a long time in the dropping, and it started about 10 years ago. A couple different things happened in a weird confluence. My then 10-year-old daughter said, I'd like to see a shaman because I want to know more about my past lives. When your 10-year-old says that, you find a shaman. So luckily we're in Berkeley. So, and they're not hard to come by. Anyway, in the process, I also had a reading with this person, and most of it was kind of what you'd expect, except she was very adamant on this intuition that she had that in a past incarnation, I had literally been Lord Byron. needless to say, that was an upsetting revelation. I mean, like, why couldn't I be the nice guy or the genius guy? I got to be that guy. But, I started thinking, okay, mom issues, check. Congenital bone problem, check. Can't fight your own battles, check. Maximalist, check. Appetite issues. Yep, we got it. So anyway, I was thinking about romanticism and about this concept of the sort of unimpeachable authority of personal imagination and giant emotions, and how far can you take that? Around the same time, I got invited to go to Rome with the University of Washington summer session in creative writing, and that kind of combined the beginning of the end of my marriage and a terrible medical, like a pharmaceutical meltdown that caused me to kind of lose my mind a little bit. So between these things, I was meditating a lot on romanticism and the romantic, both with small and capital R's, and how that all came together. Then I ended up with a fellowship at the James Merrill House, and a lot of things came full circle, and I'll just leave it there. But I will start with one of the poems that was generated by that trip to Rome. This is, it's called Ruin, and it's specifically, anyone who's been to Hadrian's Villa will recognize that that's what I'm talking about, but you don't have to, because, anyway, it's called Ruin. Even the dust is dazzling, glinting grit, biotite mica's black fire in the dirt, glass pulverized underfoot. The grandiose wreckage goes on forever. Everything recrystallizes over time. Chert turns to flint. Shale turns to slate. Acanthus leaves blanch, petrify. A stagnant pond where carp curve and listless ogies will compress to banded malachite. Ephemera deliver disquisitions on the law of similarity for porphyry, red poppies, and for lapis lazuli, wild gentian. Gem-eyed lizards fix themselves like party-colored pins and cloisonne to the remaindered walls. In all of this great dissertation, it's the shift in form that gives things value. People like to stay present, but that's clearly not a thing, even out here. Things crumble and break down and are reconstituted. Nothing wrong with it, right? They say not to let your damage define you, but I think that's a mistake. So then I'll do one more thing that definitely came out of the same trip. I ended up with, ekphrastic art has always bugged me. It feels inaccessible if you don't have access to those pieces of art. There's a smack of elitist something or other to it. So when something bugs me, I usually confront it by making myself do it. And I ended up with this suite of poems about Bernini sculptures. And this one is the one that ended up in the cover, despite being, as has been pointed out to me, everyone's favorite statue. I know it's a well-trodden image, but that's kind of the point. This is, I took a bunch of art history classes in high school. I had to, it was a graduation requirement at my school. So I'd seen these things on paper, and I knew you probably didn't get the whole gist, but when I walked into that room in the Borghese gallery, I think I pretty much just sat down on the floor and started bawling and didn't stop for quite a while. I found this thing completely overwhelming. So anyway, this is Apollo and Daphne. The block yields up the girl, just as he'd hoped. Dead pale, appalled, and rooted to the spot. Turn. Then there's him, the stricken god, in hot pursuit of a quarry elegantly troped in metamorphic rock. Turn. Non-foliation curves smoothly into foliage, carved so thin it actually filters light, as if within its protolith, not just marble, but the fruition of the whole drama were already there. His ardor, her refusal, and the flash of sudden awareness, this chase, this mad dash can have no victor. Turn. Her flying hair a glancing sting. Her final backward glance somehow at once defiant and blank. His hands seeking skin, touching bark, stalemate. Turn. She stands, arms lifted, leafing. Pièce de résistance. Passion transforms, and not even a god comes out unscathed. Some things simply cannot be gotten over. Arrow to the heart, clean shot. The scent of bay will always leave an odd longing. The scent of bay will always be most strong in full sun. Turn. The contrapposto twists from stone to girl to tree. Each cut insists we see it's been all locked up all along. So going quickly from a stone paradigm to the, I've got botany issues, and there's never going to be a book that I put out in this lifetime that does not delve into the sex lives of flowers or birds. Spend way too much time thinking about these things. But on a visit to Bordeaux right around this time of year, a few years ago, I was just so overwhelmed by the proliferation of hollyhocks like popping up out of absolutely everything. And I just thought, oh my God, they work so hard. Like, how can something growing out of a sidewalk crack put out that kind of glam? But they're so like, in fact, I pulled these out of my garden this morning. Here, let's see if I can get them on camera. These bad boys, they're 13 feet tall, and it's ridiculous. And now that I put them back down, they're going to overwhelm the vase they're in, and water will spill everywhere. So sorry I did that. But this is called Entre deux Mers June. Every rangy sidewalk crack hollyhock in Bordeaux says the same damned thing. Depend on nothing. Nothing to shore you up, nothing to nourish or validate, nothing. They rise up against half the doorways in town, coming out of nowhere, staying local, dressed up anyway, posing before the stone walls like florid hookers, 6 feet tall or more, veins displayed, stems clad in starry hairs, flexed petals powdered with pollen, as if to make a point of how privation shouldn't stop you. They say to stand your ground and take it. Take neglect and turn it to your advantage. Build a little empire of your own with it. Turn it to pith and pigment, frill and flush, flashy colors that look ridiculously expensive, topaz and jet, cochineal, Tyrian purple. Turn it to wantonly arrogant dry fruits not in the business of attracting anything, because screw that. Take nothing, own nothing, come out on top, present your proof of concept ahead of schedule and under budget. Live on your own terms like that. And there's nothing anyone can do, though they will want to. Because once you need nothing, you will scare people. You will make them want to cut you. But here's the thing. Being hollow doesn't really make you stronger, but it does make you harder to bend. And a structure built on nothing is near impossible to bring down. I think I'll read Able Muse was kind enough to put this poem in that recent issue, and it's all kind of, these might be running far afield of each other to the listeners, but they're completely intertwined to me. This began going back to that Rome trip. This starts with an epigraph by the awe-inspiring Richard Kenny, who was one of the people running that program, and at the end of the program crafted a double dactyl in everyone's honor who was there. And I wish I remembered mine, but I can't, because it was like 40 lines long. So I got a little snark for my maximalism, and it was well deserved, and I loved it. So I'm taking a line from one of his long poems, and it's just this: the pattern's partial, Lord, its pointillism incomplete. To plot this form requires more flame. This is still a constellation without a name. And this poem is called Space is the Final Frontier. And I don't mean physical space. So at this point, nothing's truly off the table. Venus is conjunct Mars in Aries. It's a gambler's placement. Everything just fits, however transitory and unstable. Everything's ours and filthy with potential. Like puzzle pieces, we'll say later, blown away by how one moment writes its own little masterclass on force majeure. Essential story points emerge in filaments of glitter, one or two that demarcate the roofline or the firmament, intense enough to see in daylight, then a great proliferation littering the field at dusk, out of which certain truths emerge, an archetypal, overwhelming surge of myth and implication. What's revealed is, more than anything, a timeless story of how we conjure meaning from those chance alignments, accidents of circumstance, flashes of recognition of a glory we need to feel has implicated us. We say inevitable, point out the yod our birth charts share, the thumbprint divots God pressed on both our fontanelles at once. Think of the first time, if you can pin down what that even was. We were 13, we were infants in San Anselmo. There's a blur of images from other lifetimes, brown eyes watching for the slice of light that cuts the hardwood just before the bedroom door opens, glass fracturing against the floor of a room you know but don't, a parakeet's small riot of green and yellow feathers. Whose pet bird was that? It talked. Why must it mean something that I have memories that are not mine, or that were haunted by the same dream where a child with bronze curls says her name must be spoken? Staggering out of a bar in Cap Hill, we are dazzled by the cold clarity of the air, eyes drawn upward by a spate of brilliances, diamond cut diamond, spitfire daughters of Atlas burning with an old lament for things that never change, but should. In 89 years, we will meet again, this time in Jaipur. Me, 12, over men already. You, 16, shy, with good teeth and lean thighs and no idea how to start a conversation. But despite ourselves, we'll share a certain thrill. When night falls and Electra rises, we will grow attached. It will seem oddly foreordained. Things will go sideways anyway. We'll say, it's written. We'll believe it too. Today, Venus squares Pluto, indicating strained relations stemming from intensity of feeling. We do not yet understand how deep this goes. How could we? One dim strand emerges, then a radiant tapestry. I have a couple more here. This, I figured as long as I was dealing with the romantics, Coleridge needed a shout out too. This is called Tierra del Fuego. When it's all gone south for good, I'd have you recall you knew all along it was going to go down that way. And you boarded this bark on your own ridiculous dime. You'll say you're more comfortable in motion. You'll say penguins when you mean pelicans if the mezcal becomes too seductive. Who knows? Perhaps when it's time to call it, you will find the empty miles calming. Perhaps you'll start to see things, snakes, for instance, twisting their lustrous bodies in the wake of your craft, and understand it sometimes takes distance to know what you love. That what reconciles you to love even cold-blooded things for their own sake is self-abnegation and miles and movement. So move, but remember your shades. The sun on the ice can burn the sclera, which hurts, and you're already far from San Blas, which hurts. But you've learned this is not about us, if you've learned anything. And of course, there's no return trip. So keep in mind, should you be at a loss, how proximity can obscure things too. You're clever. You know the primary phenomenon is clarity. Every cryptic facet and flaw and inclusion aflame with the truths of natural law. The diamond you'd bought her, the gilded glaciers, on and on, the crack in the pattern will only ever be the radiant of the spark. The distal rim of the world is a field of infinite fire. You will find things to love in that stark brilliance, things you at least believe you love. The luciferin scrim of the austral auroras, the way the penguin wings become flippers, how clear the sky is and how still the water. Please remember who you are. At a certain point, all thought must manifest as growth. Cosmic attraction is expressed in crystals, and as much as we've been trained to fight it, all the relevance is drained from despair over time. You'll make a fist in the air at the crux and your thumb will point south, but you already know that too. This is analogical vision at which you have always excelled. You are bound for porvenir, which you also know. Hereafter, there are no calms, but a gold rush every sundown. Watch it ebb and think of us, because I fear nothing's ever as solid as we would like it to be. And I'd have you remember the snow, the way it swirled around us in mercury vapor light at the shore of a lake once. Don't lose your jacket, despite what you're sure of, all you've been told of the South and of getting free. I must warn you, it is cold at the bottom of the world. And I've got two more. I'm going to go back to my, I wasn't kidding. I really do have a thing. No, I have three more. Hold on. Let me know if I don't have three more. This is a quickie. I'm always interested in what's going on with like the non-exotic sort of, things we think of as trash plants and trash birds and stuff like that. So this is my little ode to feral pigeons. It's called Rock Dove. Sure, it's a little dirty, but that's life in the city, lover. There's no point in saying get out of the gutter. This is not a bad habit. There's something in our basic nature that keeps us here, stalking the cobbled squares in search of such as can be found. If much depends on what's discarded, even more is a matter of inventiveness, a gift for seeing as a gift, whatever happens to us, for finding needful anything that strays across our paths, a generalist's attraction to attraction. We survive by cobbling things together. We're about acceptance, which is not the same as peace. It's letting things be piecemeal, rather, thriving on it, omnivorous, adaptive to the nth. It's taking what the world gives us with reflexive good grace, humbly reflective on its each small, simple gratification, the leftover cast off, accretive tesserae, the cracks between the stones where anything can lodge. We dodge contempt. We are the square's familiars. We sample what's on offer, and we never complain it's not enough. And maybe later, you'll make believe we're strangers, flash the green light off your gorget, gorgeous, dazzle me, like mines. And what we most like is the way there's so much novelty in common ground. Yes, so apparently I am talking fast enough to have the two poem thing left, so that's good. Sticking with the bird thing for a second, my other bugbear besides ekphrastic poems is persona poems, so I had to do one of those too. And I have a couple of confirmed Greek mythology freaks in my household, so in a discussion of who's the best character in the Odyssey that was happening at my dinner table one day, I realized that I really had some unresolved issues with Calypso. Anyone who knows me probably knows why, but meanwhile, this is called Field Guide to the Birds of Ogygia. Everything here is rhetorical, even the sky, which at dusk cannot help but compare itself to a fire opal, a field of gaudy flame that spreads to the breakers in a fit of chiasmus. I've been left to my own devices for ages, a good loom and a lyre and a watery soprano voice like a windward-facing waterfall, all spray and prism. We're all prisoners here. Best make the best of it. Develop a hobby, elaborate patterns. Birds do it all day long. And most days are long at this latitude, which is good for the grapes and the flax and the birds. So many birds, vast shifting rafts of improbable names, laughing tern, godwit, duck, chat, little stint. Even they, no, particularly they, seem to be figurative, like living flights of semantic fancy. The gregarious must learn their obligati. Those consigned to solitude sing songs that seem inborn. Everyone has a bias. Over time, they braid themselves together, one long line crossing the next until a tapestry telling a tale with a multi-POV narrative makes sense of all the noise. The icterids who cling sidewise to the reeds with their small, sharp feet have a native tongue, half flute, half jigsaw, eerie tremolando trills born in the syrinx that then travel to the mind. Their culture is mainly preoccupied with itself. By contrast, starling murmurations are polyglottal and compose exuberant symphonic poems, a polyphony sampling the screams of hawks, the hoarse complaints of terns, even the frogs inspire them, and the creaking of the cedars in high winds. There is a blue rock thrush who visits now and then, flaunting a plumage that takes cues from the sea itself, its color structural, like the sea as well, wave interference. I have noticed that the most amazing songs are often made by those who live alone. It makes sense. Honestly, sometimes I think the gods send misery because they want to hear more songs. I will be writing them for you forever, by the way, after the end of your little stint, your temporary stay. This island is a stopping place for many, a home for relatively few, and yet beautiful is still a mandate here. And it takes all-day precision and a kind of ruthless competence I guess I have. It is exhausting. But there's such a thing as fruitless work we do because we are ordained to it, so here I am, domestic goddess, ace birder, nectar sommelier, certified naturalist, and by the way, no slouch in the bedroom. And for what, I wonder? Nonetheless, one works with what one has. Training vines in a basket shape that's borrowed from weaver birds and spinning spider silk into fabric for a dress dyed with the shells of spiny whelks to match the lingering, whiny finale of the sunset. I'll wear it for you, though I know you won't be back. Despite which, I expect I will, in a certain rose gold light, still scan the east forever, just in case. The skies will fill with clouds of rasping gulls and sociable lapwings. Hey, I did what I could. I made you safe, never forced you to talk. Your bed was kept warm, and the wine had a pleasing calcareous backbone. Think of that when you're lashed to the mast and the shanties commence. And while we're at the beach, I will end with a more local beach to me. I don't know how many people in this room have ever been to Fort Bragg, California, but there is a kind of famous cove there that, because of decades and decades of just wanton trash dumping, it's about 3 feet deep in sea glass. There, you don't see sand, you just see a field of glass. It's absolutely magical. I took my kids there one day, and I could hear these two young women sitting near us that were talking, one of them clearly a local, one clearly a visitor, and the local girl was bitching, like, yeah, it's really sad because people take the glass and one day there won't be any more. It sucks. And I was thinking, yeah, we call that a cleanup. That's literally industrial waste, ma'am. But it's funny what the trash to treasure transit can sometimes be, right? So this is just called Glass Beach, Fort Bragg. And before I read it, I'll quickly mute myself again. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody at Able Muse and to Rachel Hoddes for seeing me. This has been a delightful process. I'm so happy to have this book coming out with you guys. I know it's got an amazing home, and I just couldn't be more grateful. Glass Beach, Fort Bragg. Afterward, the royal detritus washes up for days, shifting, but always stuck in the rack zones back and forth. No one owns it, and no one can really take it away. It has foiled all remediation efforts, and it always will. But it does change. Small things accrue meaning in their accumulation. Sharp things do lose edge to agitation, and afterward, the tide recedes across a field of silicate and calcium and vitreous aggregate. It is the sum total of everything we will ever break, jettison, discard. I admit it, I still fail at being happy enough, though I know what the litter becomes when the tide's been at it. When it's washed and sunlit, the wreckage can seem like treasure. Thrust a hand in and pull it back bleeding, fistful of sea glass and something sharp you weren't expecting. I don't want to sift through all that anymore. It's all just words. And after words, empty shells even the birds know better than to linger over. They were liars, whoever said a long memory is a gift. Thank you very much.
Amy, thank you so much for that reading. I just sent out a note on the chat to feel free to unmute yourselves if you want to applaud or whistle or cry out encouragements. I know that it's very difficult on Zoom to convey.
Absolutely terrific. Wonderful. Terrific.
I'm gonna.
It occurred to me as I'm laughing silently to something you said, Amy, that one of the oddities of doing a Zoom reading is you can be very funny and there's this silence that follows what you've said, which is probably like the price one pays to not listen to coughing and unwrapping candy throughout the rest of the reading, right? So, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. We will have a Q&A briefly at the end of the reading, so there will be opportunities to say more and to ask questions and all of that. But for now, I ask everybody to just hold on because we have one more reader. It is Kelly Rowe. Kelly, are you ready for me to provide your introduction and to get rolling?
I think I am.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Kelly Rowe received her MFA in English from the University of Iowa and her JD from Emory University. Her second chapbook, Childbed Fever, was selected for the 2021 Rain Arroyo series and was published by Seven Kitchens Press in 2022. Her first chapbook, Flying South on the Back of a Dove, was runner-up for the Robert Phillips Chapbook Prize and was published by the Texas Review Press in 2019. She has recently published poems in journals including North American Review, New Ohio Review, 32 Poems, Massachusetts Review, Salamander, and New Letters. She lives in Flagstaff, Arizona, and works as a volunteer attorney representing undocumented women. Will you please welcome with me Kelly Rowe?
Thank you, Stephen. That was lovely. And I thank you for hosting this reading because I know it's a lot of work, especially with so many readers. So thanks. I'd also just like to thank our publisher, Alex Pepple. I still remember where I was when I talked to him and he told me I had won the book prize and how nice he was as I babbled on about how excited I was. And it really only got better after that. He took a rough manuscript, copy edited it within an inch of its life, which it really needed, designed this beautiful cover. But all through that process, he made me part of the process. And I'm so grateful to you, Alex. Thank you. So, my book is called Rise Above the River. And I guess you could call it an elegy for my younger brother, who was kind of a golden boy, handsome and charming and smart, the whole package. When he was 11, he was sexually abused by a teacher. And when he was 46, he committed suicide after having become an alcoholic and a drug addict. So the book arose out of my efforts to understand what happened to my brother. And one thing I've always been good at is research. So the middle of the book is a section called My Cold, Cold Case, where I kind of imagine myself as a detective. And I'll read three poems from that section. At the beginning of the section, there's a quote, and it reads, "Respondents reported that the sexual abuse by women was more harmful and detrimental than the sexual abuse they had experienced by men. These findings challenged the perception that sexual abuse by women is relatively harmless and inconsequential as compared to sexual abuse by men. And that's from Miriam Denov's research on the long-term effects of child sexual abuse by female perpetrators. And that quote was very important to me because my own father, when he learned about the abuse, his comment was, ugh, no harm, no foul, boys like sex. So the first poem I'd like to read is called Opening the Case File. An ordinary boy who liked to read, tramped the woods, climbed trees as if they were masts, who balanced untethered in the canopy, cried out, "The world goes on forever, and I'm the king." No one was watching. No one saw her when she came, the great black bird. A sudden flap of wings broke his clear gaze, the bare foot slipping, and no one heard the shout just before the free fall. Look, no hands. Look at me. During my research, I tried to find not just the facts of what happened to my brother. I wanted to know more about the person who had abused him. And after a lot of research online, I found her Facebook page. And for me, one of the most disturbing things on the Facebook page was her constant references to her Christianity. So this poem is called Finding the Perp's Facebook page. Weeks in the blind, binoculars raised to scan, trees, swamp, horizon, then a small click, like an eyelid closing. And there she is, outlined on a branch, shoving her head busily under a black wing. Careful, the least catch of your breath will cause a wild caw, a call to dear God, who forgives, who has hidden her all these years. But maybe someone else will hear her prayer and laugh. Maybe a boy with a rifle, one at a turkey shoot, walking alone through the woods. Or if he is no longer able to hear or walk or shoot, then maybe someone else, someone watching who loved him once, who held on to the gun. And the third poem I'll read from this section is called Surveillance. And I do want to just say that this is an imaginary surveillance. I have my eccentricities, but I did not stalk the perpetrator in real life. Surveillance. Keep your eyes fixed on the gate and the little dog racing up and down and down and up the chain link fence until here she comes. Not bird-like now, no, waddling, weighed down with buckets of Easter lilies, long stalks bending as she shoves them into the trunk. Follow her to the small church where the altar is shrouded in a black veil. She fills 2 urns, then kneels, sways, praying aloud. A sweet odor penetrates the sanctuary. A false note breaks off as the boy soprano balks. Perched on a cliff above the river, he falls silent, shivers. Where are his wings? This is your moment, detective. Draw close and whisper in the perp's pink ear. Guess what that sweet smell means? That one day our dead will rise and rotting, beloved, lovely. They will lift up their hearts to God, and he will pat the worn cushion beside him. Come, child, tell me about your suffering. And at last they'll sound the turbulent waters of their innocence. They will spread their wings. They will rise above the river. Oh, Lord, how they will sing. The next section of the book is really about what happened to my brother and to some extent to me when he became an adult. And it's called What Was Left of Us. I'm going to read one poem from that section. It's called Kingdoms Stretch Away. And my brother was a journalist with the Miami New Times. He was a very talented writer. And he decided that he was going to quit his job to focus on writing his novel. And after his going away party, he and some friends went to the railroad tracks outside of the city. And he took a penny out of his pocket and put it on the tracks to watch the train come and flatten it the way children do, the way he had often done as a boy. And the train came. What he didn't realize is there was also a train coming the other direction, and he stepped backwards onto the tracks behind him. And he was caught by the cowcatcher and thrown. He survived, but just barely. And there is a quote at the beginning of the poem, and it reads, "Is it not worthy of tears that when the number of worlds is infinite, we have not become lords of a single one?" And that's from Plutarch, quoting Alexander the Great. Yesterday, I found a photo, you standing beside a train, like the one whose cowcatcher caught and launched you as casually as a bully's boot might lift, shake off a cat who sank its claws into his leg. The 2-day beard, the look pure meanness, says you learned something in that unexpected flight through a humid Florida night. Something about the world that at your christening gave you the gift of seeming to embody golden light, of listening to a distant music others couldn't hear, the world that whispered in your ear as you flew like a toy that it was bored with and had tossed. Ciao, you're on your own now, boy. In the hospital, they helped you stand. A buzzing neon tube over the mirror illuminated a greenish body sewn up from top down. The back of your head invisible with the gash where they inserted the metal plate, now the scaffold of your head. You laughed. It hurt. You spit a little blood into a tissue. Beyond the window, kingdoms stretched away, oceans that now you knew you'd never cross. Well, well, you said, turning away, there are infinite worlds, and I not lord of one. You bowed your head. You never wept, but I do now, for all you were, for what you learned. And I think I have time. I'd like to read one last poem. It's in the last section of the book, which is called Reconciliation. And for most people, when you lose someone to suicide, you spend a lot of time wishing that you could go back and change things or have a chance to talk to them again. Particularly if, as I was, you're estranged from that person. So this last poem is called Prayer for Lucifer Fallen. And it's after a painting, speaking of ekphrastic poems, it's after a painting called The Fallen Angel by a French painter called Alexandre Cabanel. And the painting shows Lucifer after he's been tossed out of heaven, lying in a desert, barren landscape. So, prayer for Lucifer fallen. In the painting, naked and still beautiful, he weeps for what is lost, but angrily he can't grasp that it is gone, and will look back and back on paradise as on a childhood still visited in dreams. Don't you miss him, your beloved? Don't you remember how hard he made you laugh, wearing a tea cozy on his head, telling the angels crazy fortunes with a marked deck? Then there was his voice, the only one to reach the pure high notes of the strange music the planets wrote only for him. Oh, how easily he climbed into the highest branches of your favorite flowering tree. No answer, God? No surprise. In the painting, no great hand reaches down from the clouds to raise the wretched man, to touch his cheek, or even to cover him with his own ragged wings. Maybe that's what it means to be divine. No wondering if there was something you could have done, or worse, knowing that there was and you didn't. But after all, it was none of your business, was it? He wasn't your brother. No, he was mine. Thanks very much.
Bravo, Kelly. Bravo.
Thank you.
I hope everybody will feel free. Yeah,
Terrific.
yeah.
Absolutely wonderful readings. Terrific reading.
That was so good.
Absolutely wonderful. Amazing.
Wonderful,
Absolutely
Kelly.
amazing.
Wonderful.
Terrific. Terrific.
Amy?
Happily, we do have a little bit of time here at the end, and I know it's customary at a reading in person to attempt a Q&A, and I don't, we won't linger in the awkward silence of Q&A if nobody has questions, but I have questions actually. One question for both Amy and Kelly, if I may. And then if other folks have them, I hope they will, either send a message or, chime in as appropriate. The question I have is, looking at both of your books, they felt very meticulously structured to me. They just felt structurally sound. And my question had to do with whether that was a structure that you discovered sort of in the process or after the fact, or whether it was a structure that you were working towards relatively early in the compositional process for these poems. Does that seem like a reasonable question?
Totally. Kelly, you want to go
Yeah.
first?
No, I want you to go first.
Okay, I'm a structure whore. I cannot my brain is incredibly noisy and chaotic, and I find that having a high concept is one of the few things that will let me actually get something done. It's like an ADHD person kind of like, I hate, I don't know if I hate anything more than the word chunk as a verb, but when they talk about chunking tasks so that you can that, for me, that's what form and structure do in poetry. They are a means to get out of the noise and find a unifying, like a backbone to something. In this case, what probably wasn't obvious from this reading, but would be if you picked up the book, is that my unifying device was a passage from James Merrill's Changing Light at Sandover, and the book is segregated out into several sections that correspond to keywords in that passage. It was relatively early in the game that I hit on that. I've been contending with that particular poem for longer than I want to admit, and and it's a well I keep going back to in spite of myself. And it finally was like, oh, wait a minute. Now I've got my compass. Like I get where I'm going. So if a particular poem was faltering, I knew whether it was because it needed to be drop kicked or because I hadn't got the right, ingredients yet or whatever. But yeah. Structure really helps me keep from just containing, like having just a mess. So I tend to start with it a lot of the time.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's interesting, Amy. I think I have a lot I can learn from you. I think for me, one of my real weaknesses as a poet is that because I'm always walking that line between emotion and sentimentality, my weakness is to sometimes fall into sentimentality because I'm trying to go for the emotion. And for me, the structure helps me be more disciplined, to look at the poem not as a boo-hoo-hoo, but as a poem, a little machine to kind of create emotion. And so so that's how I use structure. I don't know if I answered your question though.
Yeah, I was also thinking at the level of the book, in part just because I know not everyone will have had the chance to see the books in their totality, and both of them seem to me carefully structured and sequenced, and it's something I struggle with, and so I welcome that input from others.
I actually have a kind of question for Kelly, if that's okay.
Yes.
So something that you and I guess have in common that's a little bit of a stealth thing, sounds like we've both done some time in law firms. And I don't have a JD, but I used to make my living analyzing deposition testimony. And it largely for corporate defense litigation matters or intellectual property stuff. So I'm wondering how much you find that law concepts, law structures, law language are an organizing principle in your work, because I love that. I love the words that come up in legal, and
yeah, that's really interesting because I feel like I live in two worlds, and to me, they're very, very separate. Except that to the extent that in both worlds, maybe I'm trying to find some good that I can do. In terms of the language, I see them very, very differently, other than the effort at clarity, maybe.
And that kind of balance between structure, or like between imposed structure and intuition, like intuitive things. It seems like there's an interplay that happens there. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
If other folks have questions or comments, unless it grows unruly. Yeah, Rachel, I see you're signaling there.
It's not a question, but I had the honor of blurbing Kelly's book and of judging Amy's, and both of these readings showed me how much better the books were than I had even understood, and how much richer. And I think
so nice.
Kelly avoids sentimentality, which is hard to avoid. And I think the way what these books share is clarity, a beautiful syntactic clarity. My personal favorite of Amy's was the Calypso poem. I've read a lot of Greek mythology poems, but the way Amy incorporates so much emotion and information and wit into any one poem. And I liked Kelly's book all the better having heard from her, and her honesty and clarity. I've read a lot of poems about suffering and trauma, And there are many, many of them, and she doesn't fall into any of those pits, but she walks close enough to them and casts her light into them. So I just wanted to thank everyone for a wonderful reading. I'm also a fan of practically everyone on the screen. And thank you, Alex, for your.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah.
Hey, my name is
Hi.
Stephen Hawks, and I wanted to ask Kelly something. I don't know if she didn't want to answer, that's fine. I know both the person the poem is about and the person that abused him. And I was wondering if you ever confronted her.
Stephen, I don't mind answering. No, I did not. There's certainly a part of me that has considered sending her the book with a note that says, "You are not forgotten." But at the same time that I often feel a lot of anger toward her, I'm also, partly because of my research, very aware that people who sexually abuse children often were themselves abused. And although I do have a hard time thinking of her in terms of forgiveness, I try to recognize that, you know, she's a human being and she did something I considered to have ruined my brother's life and killed him. But
I think possibly he was also existential, though. You know, his, you know, he had a lot of strength, so it's possible if other things hadn't happened, he probably could have overcome that.
Yes, I agree.
Overcome it.
I would agree.
Yeah. I'm sorry I bring that up. It's like
No,
we enjoyed it. My mom's here. There's Kathy. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. I have a question that goes along that line. Kelly, have you ever thought of sending the perpetrator a complimentary copy of the book?
Well, yes, as I said, I have in my weaker moments considered that. But I do really want not to create more harm in the world. So at the end of the day, you know,
Also brings more karmic entanglement.
Possibly. Yeah. So, but yes, Mr. Wright. I'm sorry, Stephen. I just see that.
No, I was seeing Rob's hand up as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, a wonderful reading by all the readers, the editors as well as the featured readers. Just wonderful work. One of the things that struck me is both the featured readers use birds as a way into the poems, but in very different ways. The birds have very different manifestations. And I guess, you know, being one of the masters of the obvious, that struck me, but I was wondering if you cared to comment on that.
Amy?
Because I'm always looking for ways into the poem, and I think the birds were, in both cases, that function that way.
So I've been obsessed with birds since I was really little, and I don't know why. I did grow up, I'm a vocalist myself. Like I trained as a classical and jazz singer. And so I guess the fact that they are also singers maybe resonated with me, but I don't think it's just that. There's something like, are there poets that don't have a bird thing? Like they transcend, they inhabit multiple dimensions. Like, you know, they're little feathered metaphors. I mean, they have so much symbolic freight to them. It's hard to imagine anyone being able to leave them alone to me. But like, to me, they just sort of, there's something so cryptic about them. Like we can't really know what they're thinking, but you can tell they're thinking things. And And so like, I don't know, I get a lot of weird insights out of observing their behavior. And I've had a pet bird. I have wild birds that are my buddies. I've got a couple that just are killing me right now. I can't get a blueberry off of my own bushes, thanks to that guy, but I don't know. They just deliver, like they just punch above their weight on symbolic freight for me. And I can't keep my mitts off them. Kelly, what about you?
Oh, I think you pretty much said it. They're all about flight and metamorphosis, and how can you not love them?
Yeah, they're too tasty to leave alone.
Bravo. Does anyone, I recognize that I can't see everyone at once due to the size of our group. So if you are if you're on the second page of this gallery, I may not see your hand up. So I hope you'll just jump in and ask any questions you have. I see Julie, you have a hand up there. Yeah.
Yeah, just on the topic of birds, if you're not familiar with the conspiracy theory parody Birds Aren't Real, do look that up. Well worth your investment. And thank you both for beautiful books. I really love both of them and got a tremendous amount out of the reading. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody? Yeah, I see Bernadette. Is that a hand up?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for a wonderful reading to both poets. I love both works. My question is for Kelly. And did you know from the beginning you were going to have 3 parts, or as you were writing the poems?
I didn't know. I didn't know at all. The book actually started as a chapbook, and then I just couldn't seem to shut up. So I kept writing and it kept growing. And at some point, I had all these poems, but they weren't really organized in any particular order. And I printed them out, hard copies, and put them out on the floor. And I began to see a structure that was somewhat chronological, but I think also spiritual. But that evolved actually not quite slowly. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have I missed anyone who hoped to get in a question or a comment before we adjourn for today after a really beautiful reading? Yeah, Nigel, I see your hand up there. Yeah. And can I unmute you there?
You need to unmute.
There
I'm trying.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
So, yeah, wonderful evening. I wonder if I could break decorum here and just make a personal message. I've had a real breakdown with one of my computers, and I've lost some people's emails. So I wonder if Mary Jo and also Rachel could send me, whenever convenient, their emails. So I've got them back on my computer. Thank you. Sorry.
Certainly. Nice to see you, Nigel.
Great. Anybody else that I am missing as we wrap up? Wonderful. Thank you everybody for coming out this afternoon. I don't know if it's correct to say, like we arrived or we're here, because I recognize this is a digital space. So it feels odd to say that people came to the reading, but you did, and it was beautiful. Alex, do you have do you wish to lead us out at all?
Well, I'll just tell everyone to check the links I posted in the chat for more about today's readers, their websites, their books on Able Muse Press. And also don't forget that submissions to Able Muse Press and Able Muse close on the 15th of this month. So you still have some time to send your work in. And I will have the recording for this event in a day or so. So check the Able Muse YouTube channel. So we have our own YouTube channel where we'll have previous recordings, and we'll have this one too there. And thank you all for coming this afternoon. It was great reading. Thank you, Amy. Wonderful work.
Thank you.
And thank you, Kelly.
Thank
Thank
you.
you to all the editors who also sat with us into the reading.
Yeah, the editor contributions were amazing. I loved it.
Great. All right. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Terrific, 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 wonderful, terrific.
Bye-bye.
This makes me dizzy to watch everyone leave at once like that.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Stephen.
Yes, Kelly, thank you so much for, it was beautiful to hear your poems read aloud this way. Yeah, I read the book, I finished it this morning, and it was just lovely to hear them given voice.
Well, thank you for reading it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Well, I'll let you all go.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Alex, shall I go ahead and end the meeting?
Yeah,
Yeah,
go
it's so
ahead.
good to see you. So good to see you.
Oh, good to see you too, Stephen. Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.